I was able to drink at home when I was 14, 15. My mother said, you can drink, but you have to do it at home, you know? My cousin is up behind the bar trying to get in the cash register. And I was like, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to rob this bar. We heard some banging. We walked up to the front of the bar, opened the door, and he was in the process of killing the owner. And I was arrested and charged with the Pennsylvania State Police with murder, conspiracy, robbery, burglary, and car theft. And he sentences me to life without the possibility of parole. Some weeks later, I met other guys serving life without parole, and they say, "Young buck, you're gonna die in here like the rest of us. You never get out. There's no parole for lifers."
So, what was it like 45 days in solitary confinement?
At the time, I was just like, "God, get me out of here," you know. And I didn't know who he was, but it was just, "Hey, God, help me out," you know.
On September 12th, 1994, my ex-wife discovered my secret sin. That day and the events of that day totally changed the course of my life forever. At the time, I felt like my bad choices defined me and that I would be forever marked by the outcome of those choices. I felt guilt. I felt shame. I felt like God could never, ever use a person like me. Have you ever made some bad choices that have altered the course of your life? Have you ever reaped the consequences of those choices? Does it feel like a life sentence? Do you find yourself dwelling on the past, wishing you could change it? Is there redemption? Is there forgiveness? Can God use me in spite of my bad choices, or am I now forever shackled for life? These are questions that I want to ponder as our guest shares the first part of his amazing story. Our guest is zooming in all the way from Fort Worth, Texas. He is the author of Unshackled, From Ruin to Redemption and Life After Unshackled. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hey, Eric, good morning. My name is Gene McGuire, and I'm a resident of Fort Worth, Texas at this time. I am also a pastor chaplain for a large, I'd say a large restaurant family-owned company, Christian family-owned company called Babe's Chicken Dinner House, all here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I get to travel. I'm also an author of two books, Unshackled from Ruin to Redemption, and a second book came out a couple years ago called Life After Unshackled. And they're just stories about my life, incarceration, and once my release.
Well, Gene, I can't wait to get to all of those things, and I don't hear about too many restaurants that hire a chaplain, so I can't wait to hear more about that as well. But we've got a long ways to go. Why don't you start off with the beginning of your story? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your family of origin.
Born and raised for first 12 years in New Jersey, Toms River, New Jersey area. That's where my remaining family's at. I have some family in Scranton, but moved to Scranton area, like a small country town called Falls, Pennsylvania, in the 70s, and grew up, went to Tunkhannock High School. I was an athlete. I love sports. So my family, we kind of grew up in a Catholic type family with my dad, Irish Catholic guy, Gene McGuire, and we'd go to church on Sunday. But I would say one of the things was that didn't add up for me as even a young kid was we go to church on Sunday and then go to a bar in the afternoons, and my parents would sit there and drink, and we'd play shuffleboard and throw some darts, and it just didn't seem like it added up to having like a faith. So that was my experience. Parents divorced early on when I was about 6, 7, and then I was raised by a single parent for a number of years, and then my mom remarried in the mid 70s.
So let me ask you a question. So you're going through a lot of information there. So did you have
Yeah,
any siblings, or were you the only child?
had an older brother, had an older sister, and I had a older brother, and then myself, and then a younger sister. So five of us in the family.
So five, that's quite a few. And you said your parents got divorced when you were seven. So you still,
Around 6, 7 years old.
yeah. So do you remember much before the divorce? Do you remember what life was like there?
Had fun riding bikes and growing up, and brothers and sisters, friends, little league baseball, and all those things that were good. Little did I know that my family was really falling apart within. I've learned later on, and sit down with my mom and had some good discussions later on in life, and the alcohol was really destroying my family from within. My mom was a functioning alcoholic. Clothes were clean, food was on the table. She worked hard. Um, so I don't think we've really ever discussed anything until some years later. Now, really looking back, that there was a destruction going on within the family, because of the alcohol and the fighting. And, I always ask my mother, she goes, "Oh, we fought behind doors, closed doors. We never did it in front of you." And because my dad, he wasn't a violent guy. He wasn't a loud guy. He was an alcoholic and drinking, but he wasn't a loud, obnoxious guy. So
Okay. So it doesn't sound like you witnessed a lot of,
I
um,
didn't see a lot of trauma. I really did not.
okay, so let's move into junior high and into the high school as you start getting into adolescence. So usually, some teenagers start having a little freedom, start experimenting with things. They get friends that party a little bit. You mentioned athletics. Now, I was involved in athletics as well whenever I was in high school. So, did you start experimenting any with substances, or did you stay pretty straight and narrow? Tell me a little bit about your junior high school years.
Yeah, my junior, by ninth grade, I was really involved in a lot of organized sports, track and field. I even tried my hand at some wrestling, but they said you had to lose too much weight, and I was like trying to put weight. I was trying to get muscular, I love football, so I started, organized freshman football. Um, I was uh, I was able to drink at home when I was 14, 15. My mother said, "You can drink, but you have to do it at home," And my older brother, he was already getting into some weed, and I remember he had some pot plants, weed, he had some pot plants, marijuana plants growing out in the garden. And I just didn't think that was my tea. I just didn't think that was me. They used to call these guys the heads, they smoke pot and all that. And I was an athlete, but I was slowly venturing into at parties. I would go to parties, cake parties, and at where I lived was a lot of farm area, and it would be nothing for someone to have a barn, and they'd bring a keg of beer in, and everybody, they have booze, and sometimes it would be a couple of joints passed around, a couple bowls, and we smoke that. It wasn't often, but it was enough that I enjoyed it, but I had to get up in the morning, I had to go to school, had to work out, go to sports. So it was really keeping me on track and also in school too.
Would you say it was more social for
Yeah,
you?
I think it was a social thing. Absolutely. Because it was maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks that I would be able to drink, you know. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a social thing. It was a thing to be cool about. So.
How were things at home? Did you get along with your stepdad at all whenever your mom remarried? And did she
Oh my
stay?
goodness, yeah. He was a good guy, and he was a Christian man. I'd see him every morning sitting on his bedside reading his Bible. And my mom, she of course she was drinking heavily at the time, those years before she became a Christian. And when my mom and my stepdad would argue, I could hear my mother saying, "Lauren, I can't even pick a fight with you because you won't fight back." And it was like years later, he would always say, "Trust the Lord, Mary, trust the Lord, God will provide." He always said that. And that's one of the things I always heard him say, "The Lord provide." And then, years later, of course, as a student of God's word, the Bible says, a soft answer turns away wrath. And he was actually practicing that.
So did any of that rub off on you? It doesn't sound like it did whenever you were
No,
young. So I mean, it sounds to me like he had some faith and you witnessed that faith,
yeah.
but it didn't like you think, well, tell me more about that. I mean, it didn't
Yeah,
sound
I,
like
I didn't engage. I didn't ask him. I never asked him. and I think it influenced me. It gave me a respect for the faith of being a Christian, but not for me right now.
So, what was it like as you got closer to being a senior in high school? I mean, what were your plans?
I never made it to my senior year, obviously. My last school year was my sophomore year.
Oh,
Yeah, at the end of my the summer, June 77, toward the very last days of my um, sophomore year. And of course, I was involved in track and field and football, and we excelled at that. Um, and then at the end of the toward the very beginning of summer, I went out drinking with two older relatives, and that ended everything right there. So
so that's right around 16, right?
I just turned 17.
So give me the events that happened that led up to this thing whenever you were a sophomore.
Yeah, I was again drinking at home, and parents were at the table, and I had a cousin, Bobby, who came from New Jersey. He was our favorite cousin. Everybody loved Bobby, and he was the guy. And he shows up one weekend, and my mom says, "Guess who's here?" And I was like, "Who?" And Bobby, and so. I was at the table, and we were all drinking, playing cards, and I had worked earlier. I worked on different farms and earned some money, and back then it was like about $2 an hour or something like that. And so I get home and take a shower and join in on the card game and drinking. And around 11:30, my parents go to bed, and then my cousin Bobby and my stepbrother Sid are sitting at the table and we're drinking. They're drinking scotch, they had a big bottle of scotch, and I was drinking beer, and I might have had a sip of that. But so my cousin says, "Hey, I want to go shoot some pool. Where can I go shoot some pool?" And there's like two bars that have pool tables around the lake, and they're about 3, 4 miles down the farm road, and so we end up going. And my parents said, "No, you can't go, Gene." Eugene. That's when I knew I was in trouble. My mother called me Eugene. So she says, "You're too young. You can't go." So I was like, "Bobby, sweet talk my mom and let me go with you. I just want to go." And of course, that happened. And out the door, I manipulated my way out the door. Went to this bar about 20 minutes at this lakeside bar, small little bar. Had one pool table. We're having fun, drinking shots, and I was as drunk as I was, and we're all pretty much staggering and laughing and carrying on. I remember everything. I remember everything. So I turn around, my cousin is up behind the bar trying to get in the cash register. And I hear the bartender is a 60-year-old woman. Her name was Isabel Nagy, and she says, "Hey, stop playing around." So he comes back over, and I was like, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm going to rob this bar." And of course, I they say drinking throws the alert mind. You lose all your inhibitions, and that's exactly, and especially tied in with my favorite cousin, and so we decided we'll leave. The idea was we'll leave. If you get robbed the bar, you come back, you rob it yourself. This is our hometown, he's from out of state. So we left, got in a car, parked about, 30, 40 yards down the street. Cousin gets out and walks back. And the idea was I think in my mind, I was thinking that he's going to come out the bar with, like on television with a bag of money or let's go, let's go, let's go. And so he walks up and I see him staggering. So I kind of followed behind him. I stood in the parking lot and he didn't come out right away. Like a couple minutes went by and my stepbrother joined me and he says, he said, "Where's Bobby?" I said, "We heard some banging." We walked up to the front of the bar, opened the door, and he was in the process of killing the owner. He has stabbed the owner to death, and he had no right to take a life. I talk a lot about it in my book, the crime and all that, and I had no right to be part of that. So my stepbrother, he he sticks his head in the door and he sees what went on and he takes off. I don't know where he went at the time, and I stuck around and told I've told my cousin. I yelled. I said, "Hey, stop!" It was too late. So he said, "Come in, help me find some money." I looked around, and my cousin found about $1,000 in a tin box, and so off we go. We leave. Of course, the backstory is my stepbrother Sid who had left, took his car and left, and he went and called the police. He went to our neighbors. He called the police. So how we get out? My cousin found keys to the victim's car, takes off, goes to the house, change clothes, and he tries to get Sid out, and it was all out of control. It was all a mess, and he. So we get in a car. We head out to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I was just following my cousin. He said he had a plan up in New York. He had friends up in New York that could help him. Da da da. And I was just okay. Well, I know I'm in trouble, and I'm running. Just what you would do when you're in trouble. I sobered up in the morning, and the impact still really hasn't, because my cousin did it, and I was kind of along for the ride. But after a day of walking around New York City, went to New York City, walking around, my cousin used the money to buy drugs, and he shot heroin in his arm. And I was just following him, through the streets and through shooting galleries. And I told him, he said, listen, you can run with me. They want me, they don't want you, or you turn yourself in. And I said, well, I'm going to turn myself in. So I turned myself in a day and a half later, and I was arrested and charged with the Pennsylvania State Police with murder, conspiracy, robbery, burglary, and car theft. And I was placed in juvenile center.
All right, so there's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
A lot of information there. So I want to go back to the bar. I want to slow things down a
Yep.
little bit. So, and what did you say this lady's name was? The owner of the bar, or the
Her
bar?
her name was Isabel Nagy. Yep.
Okay,
And she was a 6-year-old single person who owned the Marine Room in at Lake Winola.
okay. So Isabel sees your cousin Bobby going, or the cash register, or whatever, and she
Yeah.
yells at him. You guys decide to go out, and he's going to go back in. I mean, that was kind of, you said, let's go out, and then you can go
Yeah,
back
that was
in.
kind of the idea that, hey, if you're gonna rob this bar, he was bent on doing it, if you do it, well, we're gonna get out of here. And then if you do it, you come back.
You're getting out, but you were going to wait for him, right? And so,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, we were gonna wait in a car for him, and
yeah. And
if not in the parking lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you're drunk, and this,
Yeah.
and you're thinking he's going to come out, hop in the car, and you guys are going to, like Bonnie and Clyde. You guys are going to take off
Yeah,
out
kind
of
of like in
there,
the
and
movie,
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of your thought process, and so he
Yes.
doesn't come out. You go back to the door, and you said was it your stepbrother
Yes.
that was he looked in the door. Now, did you look in the door as well, or where
Yeah,
were
we
you?
we looked in, and so there's we to the left is a big long bar, and then behind the bar there's like a counter, they call it like a pizza counter, and there's some pizza ovens back there, and he had um, behind the pizza counter, he had knocked the lady out, and she was on the floor, so we couldn't really see her, but you could see my cousin standing above her, and he was attacking her
So did
and
he
killed
grab
her.
a knife from the pizza bar, or did he have his own
No,
knife?
he used uh, bottles of alcohol, and he broke the bottles and used the neck of the bottle.
Wow.
It was
So
vicious, yeah, heinous. Yeah.
yeah. So now, did Bobby have a history of being violent, or was this just a in the moment thing?
Well, it later on it was discovered, yeah, that he definitely did, and he would be the nicest guy in the world, and then he'd have this really tough um, take on the world type attitude. He had been in prison before, and I know he's passed away about 7 months ago, but he had been I don't know if it was arrested, but he definitely was charged with a homicide in New Jersey when he was like 14, 15. Another stabbing that um, he later admitted to me that he did it, but they couldn't prove it.
So he was
So
exonerated from that one.
yeah, well, yeah, he was released from that. Um, I'm not sure of the whole process, and because he was a juvenile at the time,
Yeah.
but it was up in Newark, New Jersey.
So that happened, and but so this now back to the
Yeah,
bar. Now you guys,
right.
you guys open the door and you see him
Mhm.
going at it with his arm up and down with the bottle on her, but you can't see
Yeah,
her. But you've got to. I
right.
mean, it's got to
Yeah,
be
the
messy.
image, the image is uh, very vivid. Sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I guess, after he's done, he comes out. Is he running out and saying, let's go like you
No, he
thought or
said,
not?
he said, well, he starts looking for money and I'm standing at the door. He said, come in and help me look for money. And so I walked into the bar and went toward the back. Just had no idea, just randomly looking. Uh, I remember trying to get money out of the jukebox. I was like, what am I doing? And then he found a box, like a metal box, and he pried it open with his hands, and he found cash in there. And then once he found that, he said, "Let's go."
Now, where
So
are the other people in the bar?
there was nobody there. There was, like I said, it's a small little lakeside bar. Maybe earlier in the night, we were there about 20 minutes, so maybe there was someone sitting at the bar and they left. There was nobody there. But
So
this time it's like 12:15, 12:30, I think, or so when this is all going on. There was nobody else around.
So it sounds like, and again, you haven't said much about your stepbrother, but it sounds like
Right.
he was in shock, or that it was just, I mean, he was like, oh my gosh, and this has happened. It
Right.
sounded like he ran and called the
Yeah.
police or whatever. Did it not just shock you that this had just happened? I mean, did you realize that Isabel was dead, or were you just like in the moment, I'm going to try to find some money, and were you just panicked and you came? I mean, tell me what you were thinking.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't thinking a whole lot about her, obviously. Um, um, as far as fear and shock, I don't think you go through that type of episode without dealing with shock or dealing with kind of, emotional trauma. But unlike what she did, but mentally, I I would just say I was really numb about it all, and I kind of idolized my cousin growing up. He was a boxer, he was a weightlifter, he was the man's man, and that was something I looked at. Um, uh, I wrote a couple letters to him when he was incarcerated, and I just kind of looked at him as like a not a hero, but I looked at him as someone who was a tough guy and someone who was a man's man type.
So you guys run out of the bar, you get in the car,
Running.
and you drive away. But your stepbrother, he
Right.
ran. You said
He took his car,
he
he
took
went
his car.
home.
Okay.
He lived somewhere else, but he ran to the since he was staying, there's another apartment next to us, and he went to the neighbors and he called the police from there. We didn't know that at the time. We just didn't know that. We went and got some change of clothes. Of course, my cousin's clothes were bloody. Um, and then changed some clothes and then took off. Got back in her car and we went to Scranton for overnight, and then took a bus to. I think my cousin knew because he called my mother, and my mother said, let my son go, and it's not let me go, but let him come home. And then of course I'm scared. I knew by that time um, there was murder warrants. And as a 17-year-old, it's hard to process what that really means. Now I'm looking back at it, at 65, I'm looking back, it's severe, but at 17, I don't think you grasp the reality of all that. It doesn't make the crime less. It's just that my mental capacity to really grasp all that at the time, it
You
would
had
it
to
would
have
take
some
some years.
fear. I mean, you had to be. I mean, when you sobered up the next day,
Yeah,
did you sleep
yeah.
at all that
Uh,
night?
Yeah, well, I slept because I was drinking. I slept, but when I woke up, it was man, this is if I thought I had a bad life in an alcoholic family, this is really this is really bad. Um, I have I have got to run. I've got to hide in a sense. I have nowhere to go, and I now I'm really messed up, as far as mentally. Um,
So
so.
it sounds like your mom talked Bobby into letting you go,
Yeah,
right?
his conversation, and when we got to New York City, he came to, I had a hotel room and he had one, and he came, he said, "Hey, I talked to your mother on the phone, and the police know they're tapping the phone, and so they know where we're at. I'm gonna run. If you want to run with me, you can. If not, you can turn yourself in." And when he said that, I was like, I've got to go home, it was like really was a safe place in a sense. That was where um, I felt safe. I wasn't never afraid of Bobby. I was never afraid of him, but I did look at him as this guy that, up at pretty much up to that point, I was like, yeah, he doesn't really, he's not really going nowhere, and so it was a side that I never expected uh, of seeing in him the violence to kill somebody like that.
So tell me what it was like. And again, the only reference I have is movies.
Yeah,
So tell me what it
sure.
was like whenever you turned yourself in. Did you
Uh-huh.
have some relief, or the fact that they were charging you with murder and all of these things? Was that just a weight that just kept piling on?
Yeah, I still remember getting on a Trailways bus at the Port Authority, and my cousin told my mom, "Hey, Gene's coming back on this bus. He'll arrive here in Scranton." Da da da. And so I was so relieved, and I got on, sat down away from him, and I was just like, I have nothing left to hide. So I had no idea what I was facing, but I had no idea. Even the police. So when I get there, the police come on the bus and they sit next to me and they say, "Are you G. McGuire?" I said, "Yeah." "You turn yourself in?" I said, "Yeah." So then a few minutes later, they let my mother on. They emptied the bus out, and then my mother come on, and she was distraught. I could still see the brokenness in her face and her tears, and she said, "Eugene, tell the truth. Just tell the truth." So I was I just felt this burden and this weight come off my back that I was able to go and explain, share, testify, give a witness of what occurred.
Yeah.
But so once I did to state police, they said, "Okay, you want to stand up? You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy." They listed all this stuff, and so I was just yielded to. I was just literally surrendered to whatever they said. I knew I was in deep trouble. Um, they booked me, handcuffed me, and they took me to a juvenile center. We spent probably 2 hours asking questions back and forth. There was no good cop, bad cop. It was just, I was more than willing to, share what went on. And so,
You were compliant. I mean, they didn't
yeah,
have to
yeah,
bring in the bad cop because or anything. You came in, you turned yourself
right.
in, and you were being
Yeah,
very forthcoming. So, did you
yeah.
have any idea that confessing was going to lead to a long time in prison?
No idea. So they said, "Well, we're going to put you in juvie." Told my mother. I had no attorney at the time yet, so I spoke to him without an attorney. So a couple days later, they gave me a public defender, and of course we go through the same thing with him and sit down with him and talk and da da da. Then 10 days later, my cousin turned himself in, and he admitted to everything, said I was along for the ride, um, and that he decided to rob the bar in the middle of it because he wanted some cash. Um, yeah, I was placed in juvie center, and I mean it was I guess it was a wake up call, and I stood there at the bars of the window looking outside, and man, I tell you what, the reality was that a person lost their life. And I said, like, my cousin had no right to take a life, and I had no right to be there. So,
Yeah. So that had to be, I mean, just talk about sobering,
Yeah,
being there, looking out the bars and going through
yeah.
that. So, but you probably still didn't have any idea of what was coming.
I just felt, I felt the shame, the guilt. Like even then, I remember like, why did I stick around? Why didn't I leave? Why, when Sid left, why didn't I leave? Well, obviously, Sid never met my cousin before, and that was my favorite cousin. So my loyalty was to stick around. So those things, kind of figure out and try to answer some questions that go on. But I was very ashamed and really embarrassed. So.
So tell me about how long did that process take? I mean, I hear that it can take, sometimes it's a year, sometimes whatever. I mean,
Mm,
was it quick because you admitted and you said, "Hey,
yeah.
I did this." I mean, was it did they run you through quickly or did it still take months for that to happen?
So after meeting my attorney, talking, discussing some, I guess, some options, he had told me within 90 days of my arrest, he said the best thing you can do, his counsel is best thing you plead guilty to murder, um, testify against your cousin, and you could be out in 10 or 12 years. Now, I can't even imagine being 21, 17, and I just turned 17. So that would by his counsel, and yeah, I'm sure I discussed with my mother and my mom was always like, tell the truth, and I was still seeing, the weight of all that on her face, and so I entered a plea of guilt. I went in 3 months into my arrest. I entered a guilty plea and agreed to testify against my cousin. My cousin sent word to my mom through my mother to tell Gene to do whatever he can to save himself, and he. So I waited 6 months, another 6 months, and probably met my attorney once or twice. I don't know how many times. Um, he was a young guy. A young guy. It was his first homicide case, and I liked him and all. He was compassionate, you know. Um, and then the day before my 18th birthday was sentencing day. So on March 8th, 1978, I stood before the judge in my hometown, and the judge. I don't recall all that went on. But he, of course, are you agreeable to this? Are you on any medications? Are you doing this your own, mental capacity is okay? Yep, yep, yep. I entered a plea, and he sentences me to life without the possibility of parole. In my mind, I'm sitting there, actually standing there. I'm thinking, you know, um, okay, 10 to 12 years, the weight and the impact of life without parole. Uh, wasn't even registering in my mind until I got to the state prison. Some weeks later, I met other guys serving life without parole, and they say, "Young buck, you're gonna die in here like the rest of us. You never get out. There's no parole for lifers." And I was like, "Well, my attorney told me this, told me, he lied to you." So there I was, went through that court proceeding, thinking that 10 to 12 years, even though my attorney did discuss, the possibility of life without parole. It's just a lot of legal stuff, and you just don't, honestly, I just did not comprehend it all.
Yeah, you were probably in a fog as well. I
Yeah,
mean, that's all. I mean, it's almost like an out of body experience. Is like, am I really experiencing this? I mean, I can't
yeah,
imagine. I can't imagine. But so I have a couple questions. One,
yeah.
so I mean, it sounds like your attorney was young and maybe inexperienced, but I mean, you didn't you didn't kill Isabel. I mean, you didn't take the bottle, you didn't break the
Right.
bottle and you didn't stab her. I mean, you didn't do the actual act. I mean, you didn't call for help or any of that. And so
Sure.
I mean, I can
Yeah.
certainly see that, but I mean, murder? I mean, why would you agree to that, or why, and why didn't your lawyer say, well, there's lesser charges? Did you ever, I mean, what should you have pled in that scenario?
Uh, Looking back now,
Hmm.
to a third degree, so first degree was life without parole, premeditated. That was my cousin. Second degree is felony homicide. So if you're committing a felony, which I was, we were, and someone dies, whether you knock them over or you stab them or shoot them, it's a mandatory life sentence. So second degree is what I was pleading into, which I had no idea of that solid statement. You're pleading into a mandatory life sentence. My thinking when I was pleading was that third degree was still available to me because third degree was 10 to 20 back in the 70s and 80s.
Wow. So in your mind, you thought you still, because your lawyer said, hey, 10 to 20 is
Yeah,
probably what you're looking at, which was still, like you said, a
sure.
17, 18-year-old was like,
Right.
that's feels like eternity.
It
So,
does.
yeah.
Yep.
So tell me what was going on in your mind as you're in the bus on your way to prison, and tell me which prison you went to and what was that first day like for you?
I'm transported by the sheriffs, and ironically, the two sheriffs were really close friends of my parents. They transported me from uh, Scranton to Camp Hill State Prison in Camp Hill. So State Correctional Institution, Camp Hill. It's a youthful offender. The ages vary, but 15 to 30-ish, and there's at the time there was 20 other prisons around the state that I could have went. So they put me in that prison. And we get down there and they escort me from the car to the front door of that prison. And I remember looking at it was kind of old castle type thing. Bars and had fences with razor wire, and there was a tower guard above it all, and he had a gun. And as soon as they opened up that big metal door, and they escorted me in, shackled, and they had me sit on a bench. I could smell lye soap. I didn't know what it was. It just smelled this soap, this floor soap, and everything was banging, clanging. It was all metal and concrete, and that was my first. And it was an older officer who ran the front entrance gate, and then I was just again back to this, like, where am I at? What's going to happen to me? Is these prisons as violent as I hear they are? The stories, so I just yielded to, whatever they said to do, I did.
So did they put you in a cell by yourself with a roommate, or were you in a pod? I mean, tell me a little bit about.
No, yeah. So back in the 70s, there was no double bunking. It was all single cells. So I was in a single cell. They give you come in the cell block, you check in, name. They give you they already gave you a number. My number was AK 4192. The letters represented the location of the town, city, and then the number. I was 4,192nd inmate that year in March that was committed. And they give you a cell and say, okay, you're on. I still remember you're on cell 11 on tier one, and grab a mattress, a pillow, and a bedroll, and a thing of toilet paper, and they escort you down, put you in a cell, and they shut the door.
How big is the cell?
9 by 7, 9 by 6, 9 by 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, a metal bed, toilet, and a sink, and a window.
Yeah. Do you remember the
Yep.
sound of the door shutting? I mean, that's what I,
Yeah, the metal, that clanging. I go into the prisons today, and it never you never forget. So I started meeting other lifers. Once I got out in population, I go through my first fights. I had a guy come up to me and blew some kisses at me and told me I was gorgeous, and I was like, okay, let's fight. He started fighting, and so excuse me. Once I got through all that initial established, I went to school, went to GED, got a job, and those things. But I started meeting other lifers, and they were telling me within the first couple months, and they were saying, "Hey, young buck, you you got life like everybody else. You got a raw deal, man. Da da da." So I did. I remember calling my attorney, my public defender, and I asked them. I said, "Hey, I want to appeal my case. I want to go back to court." I said, "What the deal that you made for me? I have the same amount of time my cousin has. Um, so he gives me every reason why not to. He recommends that if we go back to court, I'll get more time. And I'm like, I still remember, how can I get more time? I got life without parole. Well, I hung up the phone in defeat because he gave me every reason why not to.
Okay. Well, so again, your first year there, and then just to make the listeners know, I mean, you are no longer in juvenile. You're with adult.
I'm in the, yeah, I'm in the state prison.
You're in the big boy prison.
Yep.
You're in these guys. I mean, I'm guessing there's all different kinds of ages and so forth. And you
Yeah.
mentioned, the one guy that blew kisses at you and getting into a fight with him
Yeah.
is fighting a pretty normal thing there? Does that go on quite often? And what's the punishment for fighting? I mean, do you get thrown into solitary confinement? I mean, tell me a
Exactly.
little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, the fighting is, if you're a new inmate, especially a young kid like myself, you come in, you're 30, 35, 40, you're less likely to be tested. They're gonna leave you alone. But as a young kid, and a kid with, that looked like me at the time, I couldn't even shave, I cut my hair real short, and um, I definitely was gonna be tested, and that was kind of the rude awakening. So you're definitely gonna get your first fights. Everybody's gonna test you. It's, territorial in there. Everybody's gonna try to put their thing down. It There's fights every day, every day. Some are uh, witnessed by the officers, and they're broken up, and they're handcuffed, and they're taken to solitary, and they go through like a hearing status, and the hearing examiner will give them so much time, 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. That's the process of getting in trouble. Uh, Assaulting an officer, or, those things, they could take you back out just to the magistrate and charge you for a new crime. But most of the stuff is within house, it's inmate and inmate. And so they break up the fight. If you have to go to medical, you go to medical, and then you're going to, they call it the bucket, they call it the hole, it's solitary. It's definitely a solitary confinement.
Did you ever spend time in there?
Yes. So after my fight with the guy that blew some kisses at me, um, the inmates the officers saw me punch him. They had no idea what transpired that. So, and then their buddies came and they jumped on me and they beat me down. And they saw that. So they broke that up, and so I had like cracked jaw, I had stitches in my head, I was bleeding. We all go to the hole. I go to medical, I get patched up, and we're all in the hole. We're all in solitary, and they take me to the security department, and they had all these photos of these inmates laid out. It was like five of them. And he said, "We know these guys beat you up. We know, what did they say to you?" And I said, "They didn't say nothing to me." They said, "Well, we saw you hit this guy." And I said, "He didn't say nothing to me." And I wouldn't tell, right? And they was like, "Oh, you just go punch people as you will." And I was like, and then they were getting mad at me. They were like, "We know these guys did da da, what they say to you, da da." And I said, "Look, I've got a life sentence. I've got to spend my life here." I said, "I'm not telling anybody." I said, "I'll get killed." So they got mad at me. They gave me extra time because I didn't tell. They released those guys. So I did my 45 days in solitary. I get out and I run into about three of them. Uh, and they start approaching me. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. I'm going to start swinging again, right? And they reach out and they shake my hand. And they said, "Hey, as far as we're concerned, you're a cool white boy. You'll never have problems with us again." And
Because you
as
didn't
far as
snitch, right?
Yeah, and they said, "Yeah, we know that you didn't tell, so you're cool. You'll never have problems with us again." And shook my hand, and that was pretty big of them, and I felt like okay, yeah, it was painful, it was scary, my first couple months in the prison, all those things, but yeah, I wouldn't have changed anything really. At that moment, I was like, okay, this is working out, From that point on, I felt like I had the respect of other inmates around me.
So what was it like 45 days in solitary confinement? I mean,
Hmm.
to me,
Yeah,
I mean, to be alone in the little nine
right.
by, I don't know how big the
Yeah,
solitary
there's
conf
even smaller. They're probably 7 by 6. They're small, real small cells. There's nothing in there but a small little mattress. You give you half sheets, half blankets, and so it's hard to cover up. No pillow, uh, roll of toilet paper, and a toothbrush, small little toothbrush about 3 inches, 4 inches long. Because inmates have a way of making weapons and shanks out of the toothbrush, sharpening the end. So small little toothbrush and little thing of like a travel toothpaste. And then so if you ever need any more, you have to trade it in, and you get to shave once a week. They'll come around and they'll pass out a razor and they'll put your name on it. So every week you get to shave. You can shower 3 days a week. You get a little yard. Once an hour a day, you get like a little yard in a dog pen. They're like dog pens, and you can walk like 10 paces and come back. So they're real small, and you that's kind of your recreation outside.
so what do you think about your 24, you're there. I mean,
Yeah,
I
24 hours a
know
day.
you sleep some, but holy cow, what do you do to pass the time of day, and what goes on in that head of yours? What is going on? Do you relive your life? Do you think, gosh, what led me here? What about, do you think about God? Do you think about anything? I mean, what's going on in your head while you're
Yeah,
sitting there for
there was
45 days?
there was some definitely times where I prayed to God. Oh God, I would help me out of here, help me get out of here. Um, at the time, I really wasn't get. I later on, I had another experience there, but it was with drugs in the prison. But at the time, I was just like, God, get me out of here, And I didn't know who He was, but it was just, hey, God, help me out. And then try to find things to read. So you get some newspapers or a book from the library. You get 2 books a week from the library, and I remember ordering some books, and I really had a hard time reading and writing. I really did. Um, I had a real hard time reading. I was barely able to read. So there's a saying in the hole, uh, up all night, sleep all day. So that's the culture. Inmates stay up all night long, and then during the day they sleep, and then they wake up about 5 o'clock, and they're up from 5 to 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and they're yelling and screaming back and forth and talking. A lot of them know each other, and of course I didn't know anybody there, so you kind of learn. Hey, guy next door, what's your name? Hey, do you have a newspaper? You have a book over there I can read? And you try to fish a newspaper from next door, and so, but I didn't know anybody there. But it's emotionally, it takes about a week to get used to the culture of the
Wow.
yelling and screaming.
Well, so it sounds again like I mean, you're in solitary confinement in your cell,
Mm.
but you can still hear other guys around you.
Yeah,
And so you have a communication or a conversation. So you're not completely cut off.
isolated. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting to me because, I mean, I've heard different stories and different ways of what
Mm.
the solitary confinement looks like to you. So,
And there's different levels. You're right. There's some where there's really tight isolation, and there's some more loose. But everything's cool. If you're gonna go to a shower, they come and they handcuff you behind your back, and you walk to the shower, and they lock you in the shower stall, and then they have you back up, and you put your hands through a hole, and they uncuff you. You have like 5 minutes to shower. So everything is very secure, locked down, and your every movement is very precise. So
okay. So, I know, but the listeners don't know, how long did you spend in jail or in prison? Cause I mean, obviously you're out
yeah,
now. So
sure.
how long did you spend there?
Altogether, 34 years, 9 months, and 15 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a long, long time for someone to spend there in prison, incarcerated. I wish we could keep going, but we are almost out of time for this episode. I know that redemption is coming, but our listeners are going to have to wait until the next episode to find out how that redemption happens. So as we wrap things up here, I always ask my guests if they have one message that they want to give. I call this the elevator message. If you got 60 seconds and you say, hey, let me give you this message. This is what I want you to hear. What would that be for you?
There's not a action or behavior or decision that we've made, including your listeners, that God can't use. No matter how destructive, no matter how bad it was, no matter how tragic it was, God can use that decision because there's nothing that God can't use. I want to encourage your listeners and even myself that all my decisions are redeemable. It's encouraging to know, it's encouraging to tell people that there's not a decision that we've made, no matter how tragic, that God can't use it. He can use it. So don't feel useless, don't feel wasted. There's hope, and there has to be hope.
Gene, thanks so much for sharing the first part of your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and maybe you've made some bad choices that have altered the course of your life, perhaps you wish you could go back and change those choices. Let me encourage you. God can turn your bad choices into an amazing miracle. He can bring positive change to your life. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Next time on the If Nothing Changes podcast.
So I was about six years into my sentence, got old, depressed, looking to mask the pain, the shame and guilt and all that. And I found it in making homemade wine. So that turned to some pills, that turned to meth, that turned to cocaine, that turned to putting a needle in my arm.
We always say that we reach a bottom or a low. We get to a point where we're just like, oh my gosh, I've got to change something. So did that happen to you while you were?
Did.
Okay, tell me about that.